The crystalline spires of the Asterian royal palace reflected the light of twin suns, casting prismatic rainbows across the grand reception hall. Princess Kelara Vexorian, heir to the Asterian Empire, sat upon her levitating throne with the practiced poise of one born to rule galaxies. Her iridescent skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that betrayed her barely contained irritation as the human delegation entered her court. "The Terran representatives approach, Your Radiance," announced her chamberlain, a tall, willowy Asterian whose neck elongated respectfully. Kelara's six-fingered hand waved dismissively. "Let's complete this tedious formality quickly." The human delegation was led by Eli Blackwood, Earth's newly appointed ambassador to the Asterian Empire. Unlike his predecessors who had approached with obvious intimidation, Blackwood strode forward with confident steps, his dark eyes meeting hers without flinching. "Your Imperial Radiance," he said, executing a flawless Asterian greeting gesture. "Earth extends its hand in friendship and mutual prosperity." Kelara studied him with undisguised contempt. Humans were such fragile creatures, their single-toned skin lacking bioluminescence, their pitiful four-fingered hands, their embarrassingly short lifespans. This one stood taller than most, with broad shoulders and a determined set to his jaw, but he was still merely human. "Ambassador Blackwood," she replied, her melodic voice dripping with condescension. "How quaint that your planet continues to believe it deserves equal standing in our galactic community. Your species has barely mastered interstellar travel, while mine has been crossing dimensions for millennia." A ripple of amused chirping sounds passed through the Asterian courtiers. "Perhaps true technological advancement includes diplomacy as well as dimensional travel. Your Radiance," Eli responded, his voice level despite the insult. Kelara's bioluminescent patterns flashed in surprise at his audacity. "You speak boldly for a species that will be extinct long before I even reach middle age." "We make the most of the time we have," he replied with an unexpected smile. "Which is why I hope we can move past ceremonial posturing to discuss the Cygnus trade corridor." The princess rose from her throne, her gossamer robes floating around her tall frame. "The Cygnus corridor is not open for discussion. It remains under Asterian control as it has for 12 generations. This audience is concluded." 3 days later, Princess Kelara's royal transport vessel shuddered violently as it took direct fire from unmarked attack ships. Alarms blared throughout the cabin as the pilot's panicked voice came through the comm system. "Your Radiance, rebel mercenaries have disabled our engines and weapon systems. We're being boarded." Kelara reached for her ceremonial energy blade, her heart's pounding in her chest. The royal guards formed a protective circle around her as the airlock doors groaned under assault. When the doors finally breached, chaos erupted. Energy weapons discharged in blinding flashes. 3 of her guards fell in seconds. Through the smoke and confusion, a familiar figure burst into the cabin, firing with precision at the attackers. "Ambassador Blackwood," Kelara gasped. "Stay down," Eli shouted, tackling her to the floor as energy bolts passed overhead. His human body shielded her own as debris rained around them. "What are you doing on my transport?" she demanded, even as he pulled her toward an escape pod. "I was on my way to a secondary diplomatic meeting when we received your distress signal," he explained, his face grim with concentration. "The rest of your escort is already destroyed." "I don't need a human's protection," she hissed, even as she allowed him to guide her. Eli's dark eyes flashed. "Your prejudice can wait, Princess. Your survival cannot." As the escape pod ejected into space, Kelara watched in stunned silence as Eli competently programmed coordinates and established a secure communications channel. His hands, those primitive, four-fingered hands, moved with surprising dexterity across Asterian controls. "Why would you risk your life for me?" she finally asked. "After how I treated you." Eli didn't look up from the controls. "Because that's what humans do, Your Radiance. We value life, even arrogant, alien life that laughs at us." For the first time in her century-long existence, Princess Kelara found herself without a ready response. The diplomatic hall of the Asterian orbital station hummed with tension. 2 weeks had passed since the attack on Kelara's transport, and the fragile peace between humans and Asterians hung by a thread. Princess Kelara stood at the viewport, staring at the swirling nebula beyond, her luminescent patterns pulsing with agitation. "The Tarisian rebels claim Earth supplied them with weapons," she stated without turning as Eli entered the chamber. "Weapons used to attack my royal vessel." Eli approached cautiously, standing beside her at a respectful distance. "An accusation without evidence. Earth has nothing to gain from destabilizing the Empire." Kilara finally turned to face him, her violet eyes narrowing. "Yet rebel forces somehow obtained phase disruptors of Terran design." "Stolen or replicated technology," Eli countered. "Or perhaps planted evidence to drive a wedge between our peoples." The princess made a clicking sound of frustration. "The High Council demands I sever all diplomatic relations with Earth. They believe your rescue was merely a ploy to gain my trust." Eli's expression remained composed, but his eyes betrayed his concern. "And what do you believe, your radiance?" Kilara's bioluminescent patterns shifted to a cooler blue, a sign of contemplation that Eli had come to recognize. "I believe that I would be dead if not for your intervention." A small concession, but significant coming from the proud princess. Eli nodded once, acknowledging what it cost her to admit even that much. "The Council has granted me authority to investigate these attacks," she continued. "I have requested, against considerable opposition, that you serve as joint investigator. Your human perspective may provide insights my people would miss." "I'm honored by your trust," Eli replied, careful not to sound triumphant. Kilara's patterns flashed briefly. "It is not trust, Ambassador, it is pragmatism and necessity." The following days became a blur of intelligence briefings, intercepted communications, and diplomatic maneuvering. Kilara grudgingly admitted that Eli's approach to the investigation yielded results. Where Asterian methods relied on technological superiority and intimidation, Eli employed subtle questioning and logical deduction. "Your species' obsession with fiction has some value," she remarked one evening as they reviewed evidence in her private chambers. "You think in narrative patterns we do not." Eli smiled faintly. "Detective stories were my favorite as a child." "We have no equivalent," she admitted. "Asterian literature focuses on philosophical treatises and historical documentation." "No wonder you're all so serious," Eli quipped before he could stop himself. To his surprise, Kilara's patterns rippled in what he had learned was amusement. "We are efficient, though perhaps less imaginative than I once believed." Their breakthrough came 3 days later. While reviewing trade manifests, Eli noticed a pattern of seemingly legitimate shipments that followed rebel movements too closely to be coincidental. "Not Earth," he said triumphantly. "The weapons are coming from within your own empire, specifically from House Draxlian." Kilara's patterns flashed crimson with shock. "My cousin's house? Impossible." "The evidence suggests otherwise," Eli said gently, pointing to the data. "They're using human designs deliberately to redirect suspicion." The princess stood abruptly, her gossamer robes swirling around her. "If you're correct, this is treason of the highest order." "And if you accuse a noble house wrongly, what then?" Eli asked. Kilara's second set of eyelids closed briefly, a gesture of vulnerability he'd never witnessed from her before. "My position would become untenable." "Then we need proof no one can dispute," Eli said firmly. That night, against all protocol, Kilara and Eli infiltrated a Draxlian storage facility on the station's lower levels. The princess moved with surprising stealth for royalty, and Eli with the precision of someone with tactical training. "For a diplomat, you move like a soldier," she whispered as they bypassed security systems. "I served before joining the diplomatic corps," he admitted. "Old habits." Inside the facility, they discovered the damning evidence. Terran phase disruptors modified with Asterian components, and communications logs detailing coordination with rebel forces. As they secured the evidence, alarm systems suddenly blared to life. Security doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. "It appears we're expected," Kilara said grimly, drawing her energy blade. 3 armed guards appeared, weapons raised. "Treason, your radiance," one called out mockingly. "House Draxlian will be devastated by your betrayal when your body is discovered." Eli stepped in front of the princess instinctively. "You'll have to go through me first." "How touching," the guard sneered, raising his weapon. What happened next astonished Kilara. Instead of freezing or panicking, Eli moved with calculated precision, disarming the first guard and using his weapon against the others. The skirmish lasted mere seconds, ending with all three guards incapacitated. "You continue to surprise me, Ambassador," Kelara said, her patterns displaying colors Eli couldn't interpret. "Let's get this evidence to your council," he replied, breathing heavily, "before more surprises find us." As they hurried through the station's corridors, Kelara cast a sidelong glance at her human companion. For the first time, she saw not a fragile, inferior being, but a complex individual whose strengths complemented her own weaknesses in unexpected ways. "Perhaps," she said quietly, almost to herself, "there is more to your species than I first presumed." Eli's eyes met hers, and something unspoken passed between them. The first tentative bridge across an interstellar divide neither had expected to cross. The royal palace of Asterion gleamed like a faceted jewel under the twin suns, but beauty could not mask the gravity of the situation unfolding within its strategic command center. Princess Kelara stood before a three-dimensional holographic display of the Asterion home system, her luminescence pulsing in rapid patterns that betrayed her concern. Surrounding her were the highest-ranking military commanders of the Empire, along with Eli, who had been granted unprecedented access to the Imperial War Council. "The rebels have gathered at least 60 warships at the edge of the Carrion Nebula," General Vextelos announced, his elongated fingers manipulating the hologram to show enemy positions. "Intelligence suggests they plan to strike within 3 planetary rotations." Kelara's patterns darkened. "They've never attempted something of this magnitude. What changed?" "House Draxlian's exposure created desperation," Eli suggested, studying the holographic fleet movements. "They're accelerating their timeline before more conspirators are discovered." The general's patterns flashed dismissively. "What would a human know of our rebellions?" "Enough to have uncovered the conspiracy your security forces missed," Kelara responded sharply, surprising everyone in the room with her defense of the human. "Ambassador Blackwood will be heard." Eli nodded gratefully before pointing to specific points on the holographic display. "Your defensive formations are predictable. The rebels have studied Asterian military doctrine for generations. They'll expect you to protect your orbital infrastructure first, leaving your southern continent vulnerable." "Asterian battle strategies have been refined over millennia," Commander Zexmorian objected. "We don't abandon proven tactics based on human intuition." "Perhaps that's exactly why you should," Kelara interjected, her eyes meeting Eli's across the display. "The rebels anticipate our traditional response. We must provide something unexpected." For the next several hours, Eli outlined an unconventional defense strategy that incorporated elements of human military history. Feigned retreats, asymmetrical engagements, and sacrificial positions that would ultimately lead enemy forces into devastating traps. "It's unorthodox," General Vextelos admitted reluctantly after reviewing the simulations, "but the projected casualty reduction is significant." Kelara's patterns shifted to the Royal Command hue. "Implement Ambassador Blackwood's strategy. I will inform the High Council." 2 days later, the rebel fleet emerged from hyperspace exactly where Eli had predicted. The initial assault struck what appeared to be weakly defended orbital platforms, only to discover they were heavily armed decoys. As rebel forces redirected to what they believed were more vulnerable targets, they encountered devastating crossfire from concealed Asterian battleships. From the command center, Kelara watched Eli as he stood calmly beside the tactical officers, occasionally offering quiet suggestions that the Asterian commanders increasingly heeded without question. "The southern continent defensive grid is failing," a communications officer reported suddenly. "Ground forces request immediate reinforcement." Eli frowned. That wasn't part of the rebels' stratagem. Something's wrong. Before anyone could respond, the holographic display revealed a second rebel fleet emerging behind Asterian lines, a contingency even Eli hadn't anticipated. They had reserves, Kelara realized, her patterns pulsing rapidly. The palace defenses are directly in their path. "Your Radiance," General Vextelos urged, "you must evacuate to the secure bunker immediately." To everyone's shock, Eli stepped forward. "No, if the princess retreats now, it signals defeat. The rebels will claim victory regardless of the battle's outcome. And what do you suggest? Kilara asked, her eyes fixed on his. We go to the southern continent ourselves, Eli replied without hesitation. Rally your people, show them their princess stands with them. The general's patterns flashed with outrage. Absolutely not, it's suicide. It's leadership, Eli countered firmly. Kilara's luminescence shifted to a determined azure. Prepare my personal transport. Hours later, as fires raged across the southern continent's capital, Princess Kilara stood before her people, her luminescence visible for kilometers as she coordinated evacuation efforts. Beside her, Eli manned a defensive position, having traded his diplomatic attire for Asterian battle armor modified to fit his human frame. The rebel forces are pushing through the eastern quadrant, he warned, his voice hoarse from the smoke of battle. Kilara nodded grimly. We must hold this position until the civilian transports are away. When a rebel strike team breached the perimeter, Eli didn't hesitate. He charged forward, energy weapon blazing, creating a diversion that allowed Asterian soldiers to flank the attackers. A stray energy bolt struck him in the shoulder, sending him crashing to the ground. Kilara was at his side instantly, her royal dignity forgotten as she dragged him behind a fallen column. Foolish human, she hissed, applying emergency sealant to his wound. What were you thinking? Despite the pain, Eli managed a smile. That I couldn't let anything happen to you. Why, she demanded, her patterns swirling with emotions she couldn't conceal. Why risk everything for a princess who once mocked your very existence? His eyes met hers with unflinching honesty. Because in these past weeks, I've seen beyond the princess to the person, and that person is worth protecting, even at the cost of my life. For a moment, the battle seemed to fade around them. Kilara's hand, her six-fingered alien hand, touched his face with a gentleness neither of them expected. The universe would be diminished without you, Eli Blackwood, she whispered, using his given name for the first time. A deafening explosion interrupted the moment as Asterian reinforcements arrived, turning the tide of the battle. By nightfall, the rebel forces were in retreat, their surprise attack thwarted by the combined determination of princess and ambassador. As medics tended to Eli's injuries aboard the royal transport returning to the palace, Kilara stood watching him, her luminescent patterns swirling with colors even her attendants had never witnessed from their princess. Colors that spoke of confusion, admiration, and something deeper neither human nor Asterian had dared name. The High Council awaits your report, your radiance, her chamberlain reminded gently. Tell them, Kilara replied, her eyes never leaving Eli's resting form, that Asterian stands because of human courage, and ensure that Ambassador Blackwood receives our highest honor for valor. A controversial decision, the chamberlain noted carefully. The first of many, I suspect, the princess answered, her patterns settling into a resolved, determined glow. The gardens of the imperial villa on Asterian's smallest moon offered the privacy that had become increasingly precious to Princess Kilara. Here, away from the watchful eyes of the court, she could walk among the bioluminescent flora without maintaining the rigid composure expected of Asterian royalty. The victory celebration had continued for 3 days in the capital, but she had retreated to this secluded sanctuary and had surprised everyone by inviting only one guest to accompany her. Eli stood at the edge of a reflecting pool, watching the orbiting planets cast prismatic reflections across its surface. His shoulder was still bandaged beneath his diplomatic attire, a reminder of the battle they had survived together. The Asterian Medal of Valor suits you, Kilara observed as she approached, her formal royal regalia replaced by simpler attire that nonetheless shimmered with her natural luminescence. Eli turned, smiling. I'm told I'm the first non-Asterian to receive it in 4 centuries. The last recipient was a Calorian trade ambassador who saved an imperial vessel from destruction, she said, moving to stand beside him. My great-grandmother's historians documented the event extensively. And was that Calorian also subject to as much controversy as I seem to be causing? He asked, his tone light despite the seriousness beneath the question. Kilara's patterns rippled with subtle amusement. The Calorian had 6 limbs and scale-plated skin. Physically, at least, he was less alien to Asterian sensibilities than you are. And yet here I am, invited to the private retreat of the imperial heir, Eli observed, That's caused even more whispers, I imagine. Her luminescence shifted to deeper blues, a sign of contemplation he had come to recognize. The Council believes I should send you back to Earth. They suggest your continued presence creates unnecessary complications. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Eli's dark eyes studied her face, searching for the meaning behind her diplomatic phrasing. "And what do you believe, Kelara?" he asked softly, the formal title deliberately absent. She looked away, her patterns fluctuating rapidly. "I believe that regardless of our biological differences, regardless of the thousand-year disparity in our lifespans, regardless of imperial protocols or interspecies taboos, I find myself unable to contemplate your departure." Eli's breath caught in his throat. "That sounds suspiciously like saying you'd miss me." "It is considerably more complicated than that," she replied, turning back to him with intensity in her violet eyes. "My first obligation is to my empire. I am to be joined with a noble of House Zexphalan. The arrangement has existed since before my birth." "An arranged marriage," Eli translated, his expression carefully neutral despite the sudden hollowness in his chest. "A political alliance," she corrected. "Asterians do not marry for emotional connection as humans do. We form unions that strengthen genetic lineages and political alliances." "I see." Eli turned back toward the reflecting pool, his hands clasped behind his back. "Then these complications the Council fears are unprecedented," Kelara finished, her voice softening. "No Asterian royal has ever developed feelings. For a species with such a fleeting lifespan, it is considered impractical at best, destabilizing at worst." He turned to her then, risking everything on a single question. "Have you developed feelings?" The luminescent patterns across her skin pulsed with colors he had never seen before. Rapid swirls of violet and azure that seemed to chase each other beneath her translucent outer dermal layer. "I have discovered," she said carefully, "that emotional bonds are not confined by biological compatibility or astronomical lifespans, that perhaps there is wisdom in the human approach to connection." She stepped closer, close enough that the gentle glow of her skin illuminated his face. "When you placed yourself between me and danger, when you risked your life for my people, when you saw me not as an alien princess but as a person, you awakened something I never expected to experience." Eli reached out hesitantly, his human fingers hovering just above the luminescent patterns on her arm. "May I?" Kelara nodded, her second eyelids fluttering closed in an expression of vulnerability he had rarely witnessed. His fingers made contact with her skin, and tiny ripples of light followed his touch, as if her body responded instinctively to him. The sensation sent shivers through both of them. "In human traditions," he said quietly, "this would be the moment where I would kiss you." "I have studied human customs," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, "though Asterian physiology makes some of them challenging." Eli smiled. "Then perhaps we create our own traditions." He gently pressed his forehead against hers, a gesture that bridged their differences while honoring the connection growing between them. Kelara's luminescence intensified, bathing them both in a soft glow that pulsed in rhythm with her dual heartbeats. The moment was shattered by the sound of an approaching transport. Kelara stepped back reluctantly as her chamberlain appeared at the garden entrance. "Your Radiance, forgive the intrusion. The High Council has called an emergency session. Your presence is required immediately." "What has happened?" she demanded, royal authority returning to her posture instantly. The chamberlain's patterns displayed clear distress. "News of your friendship with the human ambassador has reached House Zexphalan. They have threatened to withdraw from the alliance unless Ambassador Blackwood returns to Earth immediately." Eli straightened, his diplomatic training taking over despite the turmoil in his heart. "I should return. I never intended to create a political crisis for you." "No," Kelara's response was immediate, her patterns shifting to the commanding royal hues. "I will address the council." "Kelara," Eli said gently, "your people need stability after the rebellion. I won't be the cause of more unrest." She turned to him, royal composure momentarily replaced by raw emotion. "And if I need you more?" The question hung in the air between them, impossible, unprecedented, yet undeniable. A question that challenged centuries of tradition and interstellar politics. "Then I stay," he answered simply, For as long as you'll have me. As they boarded the transport back to the palace, their hands brushed briefly, human fingers against Asterian, a silent promise between two beings separated by biology and culture, yet joined by something neither had expected to find among the stars. The Grand Hall of Celestial Union had stood at the heart of the Asterian capital for 10 millennia, its crystalline architecture designed to capture and amplify the light of the twin suns. Throughout its history, it had witnessed countless imperial ceremonies, but none had ever resembled what would transpire today. Delegates from 17 solar systems crowded the observation galleries, their murmurs creating a constant hum of anticipation and controversy. Princess Kelara stood alone in the preparation chamber, her ceremonial attire unlike any worn by an Asterian royal before. Traditional elements, the gossamer cloak representing her lineage, the luminescent crown marking her status, were complemented by subtle earth-inspired designs. A band of woven silver encircled her wrist, a nod to human wedding traditions that had been thoroughly researched by her cultural advisors. The delegates from House Zexvalan have departed the system, her chamberlain reported, entering with a formal bow. They have publicly renounced all ties to the imperial family. Kelara's patterns remained steady, betraying none of the tension she felt. And the military council. Divided your radiance, half support your decision as a bold diplomatic initiative, the others, he hesitated. Speak freely, she commanded. The others suggest you have been influenced by human emotional manipulation, that your judgment is compromised. A soft laugh escaped her, surprising both of them. My judgment has never been clearer. Are the Earth representatives settled? Yes, your radiance. Ambassador Blackwood's family appears, overwhelmed by Asterian hospitality. Overwhelmed is a diplomatic way of saying terrified, Kelara observed, her patterns briefly displaying amusement. I hope to change that today. The great bells of the capital began their resonant chiming, signaling the ceremony's commencement. Kelara drew herself to her full height, her luminescence glowing with controlled intensity. It is time, she said simply. The Grand Hall fell silent as Kelara entered, her luminescence dimmed to match the intensity of standard Earth lighting, a gesture of accommodation that did not go unnoticed by the human delegation. At the hall's opposite end, Eli appeared, wearing formal diplomatic attire augmented with elements of Asterian ceremonial design. The brilliant blue sash across his chest contained crystalline fragments that subtly echoed Kelara's natural patterns. They approached the central dais where the High Counselor of Asterian waited, his ancient face betraying no emotion at this unprecedented ceremony. Today, the High Counselor's voice resonated throughout the hall, we witness an alliance that challenges our understanding of unity. Princess Kelara Vexorian, heir to the Asterian Empire, has chosen Ambassador Eli Blackwood of Earth as her consort, a decision that has created both discord and hope throughout our territories. Murmurs rippled through the gathered dignitaries. Kelara's gaze remained fixed on Eli, drawing strength from the calm certainty in his eyes. Before these witnesses, the High Counselor continued, I must ask, Princess Kelara, you understand that by this union you accept the brief flame of human existence, that while your reign may span centuries, your chosen consort's life will be but a moment in Asterian measure. Kelara's patterns pulsed with unwavering resolve. I understand that value is not measured in years, High Counselor. What Ambassador Blackwood offers, courage, wisdom, and perspective, enriches our empire more than centuries of stagnant tradition. She extended her six-fingered hand toward Eli. I choose quality of connection over quantity of time. The High Counselor turned to Eli. Ambassador Blackwood, you understand that by this union you bind yourself to an alien culture, to customs and responsibilities few humans could comprehend. That your children, should they be possible, will be neither fully human nor fully Asterian. Eli's gaze never wavered from Kelara's. Throughout human history, we've been defined by crossing boundaries others thought impassable. Where some see insurmountable differences, I see unprecedented possibility. He reached for her extended hand. I choose a life of extraordinary meaning over one of ordinary comfort. Their hands joined, 6 fingers interlaced with 5, a physical representation of bridging seemingly incompatible worlds. Then by the authority of the High Council, the ancient Asterian proclaimed, I recognize this union as legitimate under imperial law. What begins today as the joining of two individuals shall forge a path between two species, two civilizations that have viewed each other with suspicion for too long. A beam of concentrated light from the twin suns, channeled through the crystal architecture, suddenly illuminated the joined hands of human and Asterian. Gasps echoed through the hall at what many considered a cosmic blessing. As tradition dictated, the newly joined couple turned to address the assembled witnesses. Kalara's luminescence synchronizing with Eli's heartbeat, a phenomenon no Asterian physiologist had predicted was possible. "Look at us," Kalara commanded the gathered representatives. "See what becomes possible when we move beyond our prejudices. The rebellion failed because it sought to divide us, to exploit our differences. This union succeeds because it celebrates them." Eli stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "From Earth's earliest histories, we have looked to the stars with hope and wonder. Today, we stand as proof that distance, whether measured in light years or in the space between different forms of life, can be bridged by understanding, respect, and love." "Love," Kalara repeated, the human word still strange on her Asterian tongue. "A concept my people considered primitive until recently. Now I understand it is the most advanced evolutionary adaptation in the galaxy." They processed down the central aisle together, passing representatives from both worlds. Among the human delegation, Eli's parents watched with tears in their eyes, fear and uncertainty gradually giving way to wonder as they witnessed their son's happiness. Later, in the privacy of the Imperial Gardens, away from the diplomatic reception and political maneuvering, Kalara and Eli stood beneath Asterian's three moons, their joined shadow cast in triplicate across the luminescent flowers. "The Asterian historical records will mark today as the beginning of a new era," Kalara said softly, "though perhaps not as dramatically as the day a human ambassador lectured a princess on her own royal transport." Eli smiled, tracing the luminescent patterns on her arm with gentle fingers. "I prefer to think it began when an arrogant princess realized a human might have something valuable to offer." "Arrogant?" Kalara's patterns flashed with mock indignation. "I was merely confident in my assessment." "An assessment that proved incorrect," he teased. She drew him closer, their foreheads touching in the intimate gesture they had made their own. "The most glorious error of my existence." Around them, the bioluminescent garden responded to Kalara's emotions, creating a display of light and color that pulsed in harmony with both her dual heartbeats and his single human heart, different rhythms finding unexpected synchronicity, much like the improbable union they had forged between worlds. "What happens now?" Eli whispered against her luminescent skin. "Now," Kalara replied, her voice both royal and tender, "we write our own story, one that neither human literature nor Asterian historical records could have imagined." As the moons continued their celestial dance overhead, the princess who had once laughed at human frailty and the man who had shown her the strength within that supposed weakness embraced their shared future, a future that would transform not just their lives, but the relationship between their worlds for generations to come.